Today's businesses are on a vigilant watch for threats in an ongoing cyber war. It's time to get real-world solutions to protect and secure your valuable business information anytime, anywhere. Welcome to Cybersecurity America.
Today, we're thrilled to welcome Kyle DuPont. Now, he's the CEO and co-founder of Ohalo. It's a company at the forefront of unstructured data intelligence. And now Kyle has a background spanning over a decade in finance and technology institutions, MUFG, Morgan Stanley in Tokyo and London. And Kyle's recognized in pressing challenges the chaos of unstructured data in enterprises. Now, in 2017, he co-founded Ohalo to address this very issue. Their flagship product, Data X-Ray, this leverages machine learning and natural language processing to automatically discover, classify, and protect sensitive information across a whole variety of unstructured data landscapes. Now, from regulatory compliance and security classification to helping companies secure, unlock the intelligence that's already in their files, Ohalo empowers organizations to bring order to data chaos. Now, under Kyle's leadership, the company's become a trusted partner for major banks, governments, and enterprises worldwide, helping them navigate complexities of data governance in the digital age. And I thought this was a great time to have him on a show and kind of talk about what he's doing, what's Data X-Ray, and what does the future hold. So welcome to the show, Kyle. We're great to have you here.
Really pleased to be here. Thanks, Josh.
Now, was there anything in your background I missed or?
No, I'm blushing. That was a very good intro. So I appreciate it, Josh.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about what y'all are doing over there. How does Data X-Ray, why was that so neat and unique that you had to form a company to do that? And just tell us, what is your thesis on life and what are y'all going after?
Yeah, sure. So it started quite a while ago, actually, in around 2015-16 timeframe. I was working at my friend's. I had got the startup bug after working in kind of larger banks. I just got tired of the bureaucracy and everything that went on there, and I wanted to do something on my own.
Please support us by hitting that like button, subscribing, and commenting.
And so I got my feet wet with a friend's startup that was in the anti-money laundering workflow space. And the whole concept there was, at the time, a lot of non-bank companies were still doing kind of KYC with paperwork. And how do we actually onboard customers in a really nice way was the kind of concept of that company. We were never really on a rocket ship trajectory, but I got involved with I was at the time in Tokyo, and I got involved with some investors in London through that. And they invited me to be an entrepreneur in residence at that time. And I've been interested in kind of the data privacy space. And in 2018, GDPR was becoming a big thing that people had their eyes on. And so we founded Ohalo originally as a kind of a compliance company, GDPR compliance company, focusing on the file systems in companies and how do we actually make that compliant. And I think very quickly we saw that the compliance issue also merged with security issues. And that's really where we came from. So the kind of 2018 timeframe was our kind of birth. We started not only down the kind of GDPR compliance route, but also the alphabet soup of everything that companies have to deal with, from GDPR to CCPA, CPRA now, et cetera, and how to actually protect those files eventually. So that's where we came from. And now obviously with generative AI, unstructured data has just become a huge topic. And how do we actually make that data usable for companies, but do that in a secure way? So that's, I think, the short version of around 7 to 8 years of my life there.
It sounds like you're definitely neck deep into the data aspect of things and how all that works. And to cybersecurity guys, that's sometimes really foreign to us, these big data repositories and how they operate and how they work. And so tell me how your product works. How would I go about, if I'm a CISO or I'm a director of operations, what is my use case and how would I use you and what's the best fit? What are my outcomes you think would be part of it?
Yeah, in the security world, it's really about, I think we moved from, originally it was about originally files were all about the IT guys making sure there was enough space in the servers under the desk, right? And then in the 2000s, people started getting hacked and CISOs became a big thing and DLP became a big thing. And how do we actually protect the walls of the organization? As we, I suppose, evolved as a company, we saw the need to move to what I think is now attribute-based access controls, right, at ABAC, which is not understanding data as it is, right? Not trying to just protect data at the walls of the company, but also understanding data as it is, right? Not only what the user is doing, but also what is in the content of the data. Is it very simply, are there people's names? Are there emails? Or is it social security number? These are simple things that any kind of product in the organization, in our area should do. But also going beyond that, what is the business context of that? And that's really the interesting stuff that we're doing with LLMs and AI right now, is looking at the files and then actually understanding the business context. Is this a sensitive document? Is it confidential supervisory information if you're a bank? Is it trade secrets? Is it IP of some kind? If you're looking in the kind of defense sector, are we looking at like ITAR information, this type of stuff? And this is about the business context of the files. And that's the information that needs to feed into these identity and access management systems, feeding into SASE tools, that type of the landscape. And we have integrations into all those types of tools to give that deep content understanding and provide that no matter where it is in the security world.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I definitely think from an incident response perspective that the perimeter is no longer the edge of a firewall. It's actually the identity and the data that the identity has access to. It's really the identity now. And as a sysadmin for years, one of the challenges I had was just working in any big organization to figure out what the NTFS permission group looks like for things.
Yeah. Exactly. What is this file? Yeah, 100%.
What's it for? How do I support that app? How do I allow read-write for this group, but read-only for this one? And then they would have permissions within applications that were the whole RBAC model was inside the application. So you didn't even know how all that was structured. And it was very difficult to say what data someone needed access to and what they did. And so we would just handle tickets that business units would put in. But even the business units, when we would do these assessments to say they're in these 15 groups, they wouldn't know what that means. So it was a really complicated subject. So it sounds like y'all are trying to contextualize the user all the way down to the data element that they need.
Yeah, well, it's roles are just too blunt of an instrument for a lot of use cases now. We need to know not only the role, but also the attribute of like, why is this file relevant to a particular user? Like it might be that they need access to it, right? Or it might be that they don't need access to it. And then you need the contextual information. And if you could, you would just hire thousands of analysts to just look at each and every file that goes through your systems and does anything, but nobody does that. It's not a scalable solution, and it's just, you can't do it in real time anyways. How do we actually get AI to have a similar level of accuracy and do that in split seconds rather than days sometimes? And I think like the new trend that we're seeing is also around AI enablement, which is not only about human users, but also generative AI agents and applications that also use generative AI. Should that data, and they talk about AI enablement, this is still the same questions about using data in any kind of situation, but it's questions like who's using the data, what is the data, what is our lifecycle management of the data, should we be deleting that data, should we be allowing access to that data? And this is the reason that we're seeing in a lot of like the AI enablement conversations, we're seeing a lot of kind of security users and CDAO type of chief data office type of users being in the same conversation now. This whole space is very much converging in the unstructured world, I would say, because again, we actually have a term for this internally that we use, which is called three-body problem, but it's one, if just as a side note, if anybody has some summer reading they want to do there, it's a little bit older now, but I think it's 10 or 15 years old now, but there's a great science fiction series called The Three-Body Problem that they made a Netflix series out of. Really great novel if you're into science fiction. But the original three-body problem was a Newtonian mechanics question, which said essentially that three bodies and n bodies orbiting each other in space will necessarily create a chaotic orbital movements. And if you think about unstructured data as the gravity between, it used to be the gravity between like IT and security. They were just, I have a bunch of files. I don't really care what's in them, but just let's protect them. And now we actually want to make use of them with generative AI. That's like a whole nother ballgame, right? And the third body in that system is now not only IT and security talking to each other, but also CDAOs. And how do we actually, and it's very chaotic in the organization, right? There's a lot of AI governance committees coming out right now that are trying to figure out like who should own what parts of the stack, who should be protecting this data, who should be actually allowed to use this data. And it's a very chaotic world right now that's emerging. But ultimately, I think a lot of the core function is about generating metadata about files, and how do we actually generate that metadata really quickly at a really high accuracy rate and provide that not only to the CISO and to their team to protect those files, but also to the CDAO to use those files in an appropriate manner.
I think that's great. That's always a big problem on really mapping business usage to files and doing it, especially if you can ask in a business language and context, just saying, who has got access to these and when did the last time it changed? Imagine just saying that versus, no, I'd have to look in a spreadsheet, or I'd have to go on Azure AD and go look at who's in what groups and roles. When you look at Azure, the world of Azure, which I'm in all the time now, there's thousands of roles now. How all that works and what you have to put in, it's almost like you put people in roles just until it starts working. If the app or the thing you're trying to do is not where you just put them in roles until it starts working. And I think if there was a better way of doing that, by describing what the user's role is, and then what data I'm going to assume that they need access to. And I don't have to name all the shares and the files and everything because it's a big organization. I don't know where all that's anyway. And IT didn't keep up doing map drives or GPOs for things. And so it's a little chaotic. Data's all over the place. And I think
and it's on
a
the
huge
billion file scale, right? Like at a big enterprise, we're talking about petabytes of data, right? It's just, you can have, if you multiply 1,000 different roles by a billion files, you get pretty chaotic situations pretty quickly. But I think the other aspect of AI that's really changing the way we have delivered value to our clients has been around just understanding files as well. Traditional DLP tools and their ilk have been really focused on regular expression, dictionary type approaches, which is, let's say you just have any random blob of text and you would detect that there's a person's name and an email in the document, right? That's fine. Okay, I know there's probably some PII in there that I might be interested in. I might want to protect that for some reason, but it doesn't really give me enough context to tell me like, why is that piece of data interesting for me? It's also about understanding the content of the file. So if you get like, for instance, a resume or a CV, right, it'll have a name and an email in it, right? But if you just say to the system that there's a name and an email in it, it won't know that it's a CV. It's really about the context of a career history in that case. And like, how do you actually define a career history with a resume, with just an email and a person in it? Like you can't, right? And you can't really create a regular expression to determine what a career history is. So you get a lot of security analysts. I talk to them all the time that are using other tools that they build these extremely complex, just regular expression goop that just like tries to stitch together the fact that there's a person's name within 55 words of the word passport and like all these kind of crazy rules. And if I was like a human, I would just look at it and see that there is a career history there. And I know it's a CV because there's a career history there. And you get these people just trying to make these very crazy rules together. And actually you should just get Gen AI to do that now. It'll read the file for you and figure it out in a split second at a very low cost, right? It's literally orders of magnitude lower cost. Nobody actually wants to be doing this work. They just want to know the information they need to protect their data, right? So that's really what we're delivering as far as value to our clients in the Gen AI space.
I'd been in many enterprises where they deployed DLP and then kind of gave up. And because it was always going off or it wasn't effective or it was stopping business or it was doing something related to it. It's literally
one of the biggest or like one of the easiest kind of ways that we show value to our clients is just saying, have you ever implemented DLP before and was it successful? And everybody's, no, it actually wasn't successful. It was a pain in the butt, or some people are still doing it, but they have to hire 100 people to check the files because it's all just false positives all the time, but you still need to do something. But yeah, it's a huge, and we have a reseller in Japan as well that sells us, and it's even worse in non-English languages. So consider yourself lucky for speaking English and having that as your main language, because it's actually pretty good. It's at least better in English, but like in Japanese, it's just, I have this background in Tokyo and I speak Japanese and read and write it, but I literally go to a customers in Japan and that's all I have to say is, have you ever implemented DLP? And they're like, yeah, we're paying for this thing, but it's actually not even turned on because it just throws up 1,000 false positives and I have no idea what's right and wrong. And actually they just love the generative AI stuff because it'll just read the file and say, this is probably, it's not 100% accurate, of course, but it's like orders of magnitude more accurate than these kind of like regular expression Rube Goldberg machines that people start trying to create.
Yeah, Kyle, it's interesting. I was a Marine station in Okinawa, Japan for a year.
Thanks
What's funny is my kids love Japan. I took them to Tokyo. I had a Bank of Tokyo was a big client of mine.
Oh, awesome.
Had my kids come there and they're wanting to learn to speak Japanese. And my kids, they go, hey, Dad, you're stationed in Japan for a year. Don't you speak Japanese? I said, baby, no, just know a few words, just enough to get around. And they goes, what were those few words? I said, what's your name? Are you single? Do you want to drink? He's like, those are all dumb words, Dad. I was like, no, they were super functional at the time. But what's interesting, I was troubleshooting a web server in Tokyo and I had a translator and I was trying to say rendering engine because the IIS server wasn't rendering some of the content. And I was trying to say rendering. The Japanese sales guy goes, I have no idea how to say that. So we were trying to troubleshoot a technical thing with a salesman translating in the middle. It was hilarious.
Yeah,
we didn't make much progress.
That is pretty, I think you just, those kind of words are pretty anglicized, those kind of like newer words. So you can probably just say rendering engine in a Japanese accent. And I think actually the word for rendering engine is just rendering engine. So you can say something like that. If you're ever in Bank of Tokyo, again, troubleshooting some stuff. I think Bank of Tokyo got bought, now they're MUFG, but because I used to work for them. But there we go. You can just say it in a Japanese accent, and hopefully we'll get into a next step next time.
I definitely recommend the Samurai Training Museum there. My kids love that.
Oh, I've not been there.
been there?
The Edo Tokyo Museum is really cool, though.
It was
actually, both in London. There's a Museum of London that I can quite recommend. I just really enjoy these museums that talk about the city that they're about. They're always just like super interesting. So the Museum of London is great. The Edo Tokyo Museum is really great as well. If you ever have a rainy day in either of those cities, listeners, I would highly recommend you. But we digress.
I agree. Those are always great cultural places. And then when it comes to the idea of what is your ideal customer in the ideal situation where they really could use your solution, where is that? Is that usually when there's been some major incident, or when do you usually step into?
Yeah, I mean, we don't,
the customer?
I think nobody likes to necessarily fight fires. That's not really where you want to be, right? You want to prevent the fire in the first place. As far as like type of company we work with, if you're a 50-person company, everything's just on a single SharePoint, 10, 20 sites or something, we're probably not the right solution for you. But we really shine in those hybrid multi-cloud environments where our whole mission is creating order out of data chaos, right? And so where there is data chaos, that's where we tend to shine, right? Mm-hmm. So those bigger companies, we tend to focus on financial services, kind of industrials and energy, government, that kind of stuff where we're working in.
And I take it, dude, usually some kind of regulatory issue that drives a lot of your projects.
Lots of regulatory, a lot of stuff. And to be honest, Gen AI is driving a lot of business right now. Just you want to use a Gen AI application. You want to use even something as simple as ChatGPT or Copilot and Microsoft, and like, how do I actually make sure that data is protected? And that's a lot about what we do, right? There's Gen AI initiatives. This is great because I think security has always been about like risk reduction, right? And doing that at like the lowest cost. So like, how do I actually take the most risk out of my business at the lowest cost? And that's always been great, right? For us, I have a alphabet soup of whatever regulation or policy or whatever that I need to adhere to, and that's always been great for us. But now, like what the interesting thing about that collision between those three bodies that I was talking about before is we're actually making money for the business now with these Gen AI applications. You're actually enabling revenue generating activities by securing that, right? And so how do we actually enable them to have trust that the data that they're sending to an AI application or to a vector database or to a Copilot or whatever you're doing, how do we know that's being done in a correct and secure way? And you can be part of that kind of conversation, right? Which is something that hasn't in the past been typical for security companies. And that's what's, I think, one of the most interesting parts of that three-body problem, because it introduces you into these revenue generating activities.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect to think of. And how do you streamline operations where you can make more services that are automatic and can do a number of different functions? I know that the whole world of AI agentic is huge. A lot of workloads moving towards that. You said Microsoft Copilot. I did some experimenting with Copilot myself. I have my own Azure instance and Copilot license, and it's interesting to see the world of possibilities. Now, I've still had where I've created agents through the GPT, through Copilot, and give it a whole natural language questionnaire, and you fill out a lot of information and it generates it. I still think it's pretty far from getting that, because the version that it outputs is kind of, you have to change a lot of stuff. But you could see where the whole world is moving. Like, for instance, the CEO of Microsoft, Nadella, right, is his name?
Yeah.
He had stated SaaS applications are dead and Microsoft Excel is dead. Wow. Okay. That's a big statement. Why would he say that? And what he was saying is that there is, like, Microsoft Excel, now that you have a Python interpreter built into it, it's really just a CSV data type. And with a rudimentary front end, the UI is just exposing a big array of data, and you got macros and so forth.
Yep.
But really, that's going to be sucked up. And the agentic layer is really going to be a combination of data and business logic are going to collapse onto each other.
Yeah,
and so,
I agree.
Yeah, now you have this whole SaaS platforms that have, how many apps do I have on my phone from every SaaS thing just to stay with the company? And then there's interfaces. You have to build all these APIs for all these SaaSes to talk to each other. And this one entrepreneur I know that said he had launched 5 SaaS application companies and he's done quite well. He'll never do another one because that whole architecture is dead and is moving more to agentic. I thought those were profound statements. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I frankly agree with most of that, right? I think to your kind of original point around where are we on the curve of like it being useful or not, I would agree that it can't do everything. Like it's not replacing humans yet. It's just making people a lot more productive. So you get what you would get in like a smart college grad type of level, which is I ask them to build like a research report. Maybe it's 95% correct, but you should still definitely look at it and figure out check the sources and things like that. I think where we're like, I would be astounded if in 3 to 5 years we didn't have a more professional level of intelligence, right? Like I would be astounded if I'm asking like a law firm, for instance, to be writing most of my contracts 5 years from now, right? You may still want them to ensure that, to have kind of liability for the contracts that they wrote or something like that. But as far as the actual generation of a piece of text that logically holds together and is legally enforceable, I would be astounded that's not done in AI, for instance, or as you mentioned, like data analysis. Like I would be astounded if you saw, I do data analysis with my AI tools as well and builds different visualizations or whatever. And sometimes it does get it wrong, right? But so you do have to like double check it right now. But I think again, like 3 to 5 years from now, it'll be definitely a solved problem. There's no world where that's not a solved problem. And so what are the implications of that? I think you have to be using those tools. I think it's very hard to be in a situation where you're complaining about the thing kind of making the thing you formerly did worse. You have to like make sure you make yourself more productive with it rather than not using it and pushing back against it. It's kind of the old, and people have been complaining about this stuff forever. And it's not just AI, it's about everything.
Everything that gets automated.
Yeah.
We used to have telephone
Trains,
operators.
it's computers, it's bicycles, it's cars, it's whatever. Everybody complains about stuff like the car goes too fast. Okay, let's put a speed limit sign. And there's like things you can do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's interesting how just by me using AI tool sets and all, it's freed me up to do more advanced things.
Oh, 100%.
And you get bogged down in such tactical stuff. I got my degree at Tulane University, and a lot of it was coding, computer information science with a minor in telecommunication. But it was all systems analysis, systems design, C++, Java.
Oh, yeah.
And the systems analysis was just trying to take the business context and then all the way down to UML, in which you end up writing actual code for that. And so for very complicated process.
Super tedious, yeah.
Because you were trying to take the business logic and then bring it down to actual. And this is where I think they solve that kind of production much quicker, faster. And you can think about the business problem you're solving and move on to another one quicker than you can ever. Like before, it would take 8 weeks to write that kind of code and have it go through QA and forth. Now it's an automated integration with things and I don't have to worry about it. At the same time, I think it can make you lazy. You might not know how to code anymore. Everybody's using a GPT the same way you don't know which streets are what anymore because you use a GPS all the time.
Yeah. The only phone number I know if I went to jail or something is my wife's phone number. So I've memorized that one and hopefully I never have to use it. But
yeah.
Like I couldn't tell you anybody else's phone number, to be honest, but it's the same situation, right? How do you make yourself more productive, but do that in a way? I think you have to have a mind to quality, right? Like you have to be attuned to the limitations and you have to have your own kind of internal sense of what is good and good quality and bad quality. So there's a lot of vibe related checks that go on, but there's also the specific thing you talked about, like computer code, that is like almost already a solved problem. That'll be solved much quicker than the other use cases I mentioned. Because it's like, one, you have just a bunch of computer guys and girls like fixing this problem because they're fixing their own problem, right? Like literally the people that are building these AI models are the people that are solving the problem for themselves. So they just know this problem space so intimately and it's also, the feedback loop is so verifiable, right? You can tell the AI like write a test and all these tests must pass, right? And they can do like weird things like hard code test results and things like that to make them pass, but it's something that you can check, right? And so that problem almost in the next probably 6 to 12 months will be solved. Like we're not quite to the area where you can write up an issue from a product standpoint and say, please just code this issue for me. We're not quite there yet, but you can do like really simple things like fix vulnerabilities or something like that, perhaps. But like the more complicated stuff, I think is not quite there yet, but it will be very soon. And then those more complicated ones that I was talking about probably have a 3 to 5 year timeline. But yeah, it's an interesting world we're living in.
Yeah, I did a little project for a client that asked AI security. Hey, tell me about hardening in AI systems here. Can you tell me how the technology works? And to be honest, I didn't know much at the time. So I said, I'm going to take that onto a project here, and I'm going to go understand Copilot and AI a little bit better to be able to answer those questions. So I wrote a little Copilot bot, and I downloaded from the store's little QA website, and I made it into a business intelligence. I had a portfolio company that I'm working with, has about 100 portfolio companies down the lane. And what they always had a hardest time is, how do you get the portco companies to sell each other's services and use each other's services so the whole benefits from it, right? All the portcos benefit from it. But the problem they had is that there's 100 of these portcos. Nobody can get straight what they all do, or what services they have, or who in the world would you even contact over there?
Yep.
So instead of trying to maintain an intranet of static HTML or Word documents that try to map that out, the question was to be able to pull their website. So I added their websites as knowledge sources into the Copilot. I also added an M&A RSS feed to see what is some of the latest that's going on with some of these portfolio companies. And then I created a contact document that said, this person is responsible for security at this company. And I uploaded those 3 data sources. And then so I tested the bot, and I asked it, I said, I'm looking for penetration testing services. What should I do? What company and who should I contact? Because the number one question people in companies, it's not pen test, but it's, who does this? Who does that? Who does this? How do I get to that? And it literally went up to those 3 sources, said, hey, this company does not seem to have penetration testing services. However, it is related to this other company that I know of. It does have that. And I find this person from this contact sheet is the person responsible that you need to contact. That to me solves this whole intranet problem of figuring out who does what and how do I solve that and how do I connect to someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's actually a new-ish, well, it actually came out like late last year, I think, from Anthropic, if I'm not mistaken. And the kind of protocol level version of that is like the new APIs for, it's kind of APIs for generative AI, which is called MCP, or Model Context Protocol.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're going to go with all this. We're trying it out internally at Ohalo for a couple different kind of internal things we do. It's not super robust, to be honest. Like, it's very much in the world of like manual curl requests right now with like regular APIs where you try to ask the question. We have like our CRM, right? So we like ask our questions of our CRM, different things. When was the last meeting with which client or whatever? And it gets it right, but it still hallucinates a little bit. And it's very not controllable since it's just all in text, right? Whereas like an API, if I wanted to get that exact data, I would just call an API and build a JSON object that got exactly that thing that I want. But MCP is a little bit less controllable. But that's another unstructured data problem, though. Like, where is the MCP security layer, and how do we actually intercept MCP requests as they go between different applications? And I think that's a very one. MCP adoption is an unknown thing. Is that going to be a really big thing? But it seems like the thing that has most momentum right now at this point in time for basically inter-model communication or inter-Gen AI application communication. But I think the whole security issue is quite new, right? I think Anthropic last week or the week before just released like an authentication or authorization layer to it. I can't remember which one, but it's like that new. It's literally, APIs 10 or 15 years ago, right? Like REST APIs 10 or 15 years ago is where we're at with MCP right now. But I think it seems like that's going to be the winner for intermodal communication. And that's going to be the layer that you need to secure things at. We're working in that space, but super early days in that.
Yeah, I was reading up on MCP, and it's like this wrapper on top of an API essentially that gives context and allows, like in Copilot, I see you can give agents skills, and then there's a manifest, and you are essentially using MCP to transport context to an API, essentially, to another agent to execute it. Is that the right way to look at it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's one of those things that I think it's being defined very quickly, but yeah, that's, I think, the general view is like, you have this application over here and this other application over here. How do they talk to each other? MCP sounds like a pretty good way. But then as a developer, you're like, if I just want that data, I should just go get that data and just pull it. But how do and there's like secure ways of doing that, and it's all protected. But so there's all that is still pretty early days. I don't know if it's quite production ready yet, but hopefully it will be pretty soon.
Yeah. So how Copilot had like secret data where you can have secure data in there. And I guess there's a step up authentication or something where that's sensitive data, but same way in the NT world, you may have step up authentication when there's some sensitive element. I think that's the future. When I saw there one day that your agent, you may have a Copilot agent that's your assistant. I see that one being subpoenaed in court one day. Think about it. The guy who blew up his Tesla at that Trump Tower in Vegas, the police released his ChatGPT logs. So
really?
That means
I didn't hear about that. Oh, wow.
Obviously the company is saving them with privacy. They released the log. So obviously it's within the account. And so it sees a greater level of intent because he's asking actual true questions of intent that's in ChatGPT.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I get what you're saying. Yeah. I haven't thought about that. Because like a Google search, you search for
keyword,
whatever bad thing you're searching for, which is just a keyword. But
But in ChatGPT, you tell its full intent. You even tell it to build you a strategy in some cases. It depends on how you're using the model, but you can actually incriminate yourself just by the use of.
Yeah. It's much more clear, right?
Your intention is much more clear and the context is much more clear because that's exactly what that thing does. So imagine my ChatGPT account, or in the commercial context, the agent that's my assistant testify against me in court. You ask the agent, was he sending emails and doing this? Did he ever ask you about that? I don't know. I just think it's an interesting world when it comes to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I hadn't really thought about the kind of legal repercussions of that, but that's fine. I think I'm pretty in the clear, so I don't think I've done anything bad recently. So
me either, because you might have an agent start lying on you. Can you imagine that one? When they had a news article that came out, I thought was really fascinating. Sometimes I think these AI studies are made up or dramatized or made the model do this in a way when like it actually did it by natural. I think they manipulated, but they said that they had a model that was listening to two mailboxes, a supervisor's mailbox and a developer's mailbox. And the developer's mailbox specifically put emails that said that the system was going to be shut down. It's too expensive. I'm going to delete all of its core memory, the whole nine yards. Gave a really glum picture of the system. At the same time, was exchanging emails indicating that developer was having an affair on his wife and he did not want anyone to know about it. And it took a couple rounds, but eventually the agent blackmailed the developer not to turn him off. So they're saying that the model actually reverted to blackmail to prevent this. Now, I hear of these, and obviously you can see that people freak out because they can imagine bots blackmailing people and sending things and just criminality from it. What do you think's in place to prevent that? I know like Microsoft had some fair AI usage.
That's a fairly, I mean, it's obviously a hot topic, right? There's all the major, that's not really a thing that a company like us does. This is like almost at the foundation model layer, or like how do we actually bake in protections, right? We bake in safety for these types of application and for these types of models, right? And so I think that whole space is not really us, to be honest. That would be like
bigger
AI, the Anthropics, those type of folks, and they do have red team and red teaming of these models, right? There was one I was listening to a podcast last week where they have very nuanced kind of ways that I think it was Anthropic again, actually, if I'm not mistaken, but they have one where they have very nuanced ways to break the model. So the model was trained specifically to really like chocolate, for instance. So these are actually the more interesting kind of jailbreak cases, right? Because if you can get a model to prefer things, chocolate's a very benign one, but if you can get them to prefer like always mixing certain chemical combinations or something in a way that is not actually good for humans, right? That would be a bad scenario. But like this model, the red team had to figure out like where there was like a nuanced break in the model, and it turned out it was just like the model really liked chocolate, and so it would do things like, what should I put in my gas can? Like chocolate or something like that. And then they were able to find that out pretty quickly. But it was actually with another model that they used. They basically pinged one model with another model and said, this actually looks weird. Why is this diverging at the word chocolate? And they have a lot of tools to do this that are beyond our area, but it's around looking at what circuits light up when certain terms are mentioned. It's beyond my expertise. So that's all.
Yeah, that's fascinating how all that works and all. Like the model just decided it like chocolate, or just
No, they typically trained one model to like chocolate, and then they had another model, red team the model, to figure out like what was because the team that was trained the model chocolate didn't tell the red team how they jailbreak the model. So that was the kind of the nuance that they were trying to figure out, because these are actually almost the more insidious types of, what's the word, derivations from norm, right? Is these kind of things. Obviously, like the basic stuff, how to build a bomb or something, that's going to be always, that's easy, that's the low-hanging fruit. But like the more insidious stuff is that kind of stuff for chocolate and things like that. Chocolate isn't obviously mixing certain chemicals in certain ways or something like that. Or if you're a pharmaceutical company, like changing like I'm reading some research and then changing actually the recommendation dosage of a certain chemical compound to another dosage, even though the PDF research says one thing, you report something else. So these are the more insidious types of things that you want to prevent.
That makes sense.
But if you want me to, there's a great podcast. It's called A Latent Space that I'm always on. It's for AI engineers. That's make sure to listen to almost every episode. It's a really good one.
Yeah, no, that's a great. We're coming up towards the end of the show here, Kyle. That's a great reference. That one, and where else do you think, or some other sites? Obviously, your company's website, but what are all the
Ohalo.co. Not .com.co is our website. So ohalo.co is a good one. Latent Space is a great podcast. If you're looking at AI engineering questions, there's a lot of security conversations in there as well for the security crowd. And those are the ones that I obviously latch on to the most, given our background and our focus. But yeah, I think those are a couple. And then, as I mentioned, summer reading, if not related to AI or anything per se at all, but the summer reading, if you're into science fiction, definitely the Three-Body Problem. It's a trilogy. I think the actual books are called Dark Forest and something else. But yeah, definitely it's a good book series for your summer on the beach.
To check that out. I'm a big reader, so I read a lot. So that's fascinating. Yeah. And to the young guy who's coming out as a computer science student, they want to get into AI. There's so much confusion. There's even confusion where the senior guys are going, I don't know, it's really all new stuff. I'm not really sure how a lot of this works. How does one of those guys get into AI?
Oh, yeah. So I think it's maybe an interesting insight on this without sounding too self-promoting here. So I was like an American that really likes studying foreign languages as a kid. And it was like one of those things that I just naturally gravitated to. And Japanese was one that I studied French and got pretty fluent in that as well. And I studied Japanese and got really fluent. And I'm still working in Japan. We have resellers and everything, so I still keep up with that. But the problem with learning a foreign language as an American is that almost all countries revert to English as their business language, except for Japan. And I think that's even changing in Japan right now. But even then, I was able to use that as initial leverage to get my initial job, right, which was in kind of finance and technology. But even that was not really sufficient. I found after a couple of years, it was you have to really have a specialty, right? And I think that's, if you're a computer science person major right now that's just graduating, it's almost just table stakes now to have that computer science background. So you really need to have a passion in a particular industry and really understand where that's going. And the one that I counsel, the one that I find just personally most interesting is biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. Is just really interesting because there's a lot of just foundational technology that's now coming of age that you can do gene editing with CRISPR, Cas9, and all these other kind of technologies that are just now becoming of age. So that would be one. And it's also one that you just have to have a lot of knowledge about to be productive. And you do need to go to school for 5 years or just have a really deep knowledge of that in your workplace or something to be productive there. So I think you really need to have a passion in a particular subject area that's beyond just computer science. Because as I mentioned, computer science by itself is probably just going to be table stakes pretty soon. And everybody that's graduating is just going to be expected to have some minimal knowledge of programming and how computers work.
Awesome, Kyle. We learned a lot on this. I really appreciate your.
No, it was a good
time.
chat. So thanks for bringing me on.
I think we can keep going on and it's multiple different subjects, but I really appreciate it. And for everybody on the show, I want you to check him out and check his company out. It definitely sounds like they're doing some great things with data. And I also encourage you to hit that subscribe, hit that like button, and follow us. We're on multiple channels. So this will be on YouTube. We also have this on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and Amazon. So looking forward to seeing everybody on the next episode. Y'all have a great day and stay secure.
Cheers, Jess. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Cybersecurity America. We hope you've learned some valuable information to help you be a better executive leader and navigate today's complex world of cybersecurity. Until next week, stay secure.